You're listening to Bigger Than Belief, real stories about real faith with real people whose belief is unbelievable. I'm your host, Adam Duxter. Hey, welcome to Bigger Than Belief, where we share real stories about real faith and real people. Today is Thursday, July 2nd, and in just a couple of days, our nation will celebrate something literally 250 years in the making. A semi-quincentennial, quarter millennium birthday, whatever you want to call it. America is 250. I think regardless of where you fall, this is a time where we can reflect on where we've been as a nation and look ahead to where we're going. I mean, that's not uncommon for any birthday. Shoot, I just turned 30 this year. I'm doing the same thing. I also think it's easy to look at this 250th birthday for America as a milestone and a bit of a potential turning point. This week's guest says that's exactly what's happening across the country right now when it comes to faith. My guest today is Nick Hall, founder of Pulse Evangelism, a ministry that started as a dream as a college student and has since grown into a movement, reaching millions of people across the country and all over the world. Over the last 2 decades, Nick has spoken to packed stadiums, trained young leaders, and worked alongside churches and communities to share what he believes is the hope found in Jesus. But our conversation goes far beyond ministry events and attendance numbers. We talk about the changing spiritual landscape in America, why he thinks so many young people are rediscovering faith, and what it means to build bridges in a divided culture. Also, why Nick believes we're living through a unique moment of spiritual awakening. Whether you're a person of deep faith, someone wrestling with questions, or simply curious about where culture and spirituality intersect, I think you're going to find something really meaningful in this conversation. Hey, before we dive into Nick, if you can take a moment wherever you're listening to please rate this show 5 stars. And if you're new here, because potentially you stumbled across this or someone shared this episode with you, please click follow, because we've released real stories of real faith with real people, new episodes every single Thursday, and we don't want you to miss on any of the stuff that we've got coming out soon. If you like today's episode, please leave us a review. Also, it could be as simple as saying, hey, I like this, or something you found interesting about this episode. But folks, I'll be very transparent with you. We're attempting to break into a very crowded podcast landscape with faith conversations that are real, engaging, and authentic. All right, folks, I wish you a very safe and happy 4th of July. Here is Nick Hall. Well, we now welcome on a very special guest, someone who I've been excited to have in this studio for a while, because I've watched the work that you do since I've come to the Twin Cities from a distance. So it's cool just having an excuse to sit down here and talk with you now. We are with Nick Hall. He's the founder and chief communicator. Is that the right title?
Something like that.
For Pulse Evangelism. Nick, Thank you for joining Bigger Than Belief, and I'm excited to have you on. And I want to start with Pulse. It is something that has been going on for a long time now here in the cities. How would you describe the work that you're currently doing to someone who has no clue who you are?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. It would kind of depend on if they're coming from a faith or non-faith background. I would say for those that don't come from a faith background, I say Pulse started 20 years ago as a student-led effort trying to combat some of the negative trends happening in culture, depression, suicide, isolation of young people. We started putting on events, trying to come alongside this generation to give them community, to give them hope, to give them outlets. And we're really trying to help connect them to communities of faith or just places where they won't be alone. So that would be my my boilerplate for those that maybe don't come from a faith. If you come from a faith background, I would say Pulse is an evangelism movement. Like, we believe in the good news of Jesus and trying to share that hope. And so we really have 2 things that we're about. One is putting on events that are engaging those that maybe aren't religious or asking questions, they're skeptical, they're seeking. We want to put on large events and small events to reach people where they are. And then the second part of our goal is to unleash a generation of evangelists who are going to go into every sphere of influence carrying the good news of Jesus. We think Jesus is the only one that welcomes everyone. We think Jesus changes everything. And so we want more people to follow him and live like him and even if you're not religious, you should want more people to be like Jesus because he was a good guy.
And you're coming off of one of those big events that you guys do just this past week, right? In Arkansas.
Yeah, we just had 50,000 people in Arkansas. People from 30 states traveled to be there. We had a couple hundred young leaders, evangelists that were a part of it. But yeah, it was an incredible community-led effort, and that's the type of thing we do. And that's a bigger example. Some are on college campuses, some are in downtown Minneapolis. We were just in Madrid, Spain. We had a soccer stadium filled in Madrid, Spain in April. And so all over the world, again, we just want to be people who are living authentically. This is who I am. I tell people, like, I don't talk about Jesus just when I have a microphone. It's kind of it's changed my life. And I think people share good things. And so I think Jesus, again, has changed my life and brings hope and healing and life and joy. And so that's what we're about.
20 years in, the story of how you got the start with this is pretty fascinating to me.
Yeah.
College assignment or what was the original genesis, would you say, of what Pulse is?
Yeah. So I came to Minneapolis on a basketball scholarship at Northwestern College. And so I thought I was going to study international business. I was going to learn Japanese. I was going to be the starting point guard for a NAIA school, right? So I wasn't looking to be a professional NBA player, although that was my prayer growing up. Genetically, it wasn't in the cards. But, went off to college and, God rearranged my plans. Fall semester, my freshman year, I just can't explain it, but people will describe this as a call experience where I just knew that I was on earth for one reason, and it wasn't to play basketball. It wasn't to start a business. It was to talk about Jesus. And so with that came this statement my freshman year in my notebook that said, my life exists to put Jesus at the pulse of a generation. So it's a statement I'd never heard, I'd never said, I'd never seen. It became the tagline for my life as an 18-year-old kid from North Dakota. Like, what does that mean? What am I going to do? And I didn't know, but I knew it meant quitting the basketball team. I knew it meant reorienting my life towards this new priority. Fast forward a few years later, I transferred schools. I'm at North Dakota State University in Fargo, and I had an English assignment. It was English 320. I was in the business administration program. So this is the English class you have to take before you become a professional, right? It's how do you write your resume? How do you write a proposal? How do you get ready for the real world? And we had to write a paper for something we wanted to see happen on campus. I wrote a 15-page paper titled Pulse, and that became the genesis of how Pulse started. First with an event at NDSU that reached 8,000 kids on our campus. Was a total crazy time. Didn't have an organization, putting everything on our credit cards, trusting God to provide. Saw so much life and change happen in us and in our peers that then students all over America started asking us to come and help them. And so fall of 2006, we incorporated, and we've been doing this 20 years.
Did you ever think that for a minute it would be what it is when you were getting your start, that it would go on to be what it has been?
Never in a million years. Even being in Arkansas last week, I'll joke with the people in Arkansas, like, my 20-year plan was not to be in Arkansas in June. Like when you live in Minnesota, North Dakota, June is when you want to be around. Like you don't want to be in the South sweating it out. So no, this wasn't my plan. Like if I envisioned my life 1,000 ways, I never would have thought I'd be leading a nonprofit. I never would have thought we'd be putting on events. I never would have thought I'd even be preaching and speaking in public places. But again, I think if we make ourselves available, God can align steps, and he uses ordinary people. And I'm just an example of that.
Why the Twin Cities? Because if you're in North Dakota and then, you're going around the country, what brought you back here, and what was it that kept you here for so long?
Yeah, I ask the question every winter. Why the Twin Cities? So short answer, long answer. Short answer is Minneapolis was the closest airport to home, right? So when we're based in Fargo in North Dakota, every flight we would have would be connecting through Minneapolis or through Denver or through Chicago. So Minneapolis was the closest city that made sense to base out of. From a more strategic standpoint, Billy Graham was an evangelist that some people may know of. Billy Graham spoke to more people in live audiences than anybody ever. and passed away around 2018, 1920. But Billy Graham was headquartered in Minneapolis for 50 years. And so Minneapolis has a legacy of the Church of Minneapolis helping facilitate and put on outreach and different efforts that have impacted the world. And so whether strategically or not, we have benefited from deep roots of grandparents, aunts and uncles, people who were serving. So our staff, many of them worked for Billy Graham for 35 years. We have board members. And so, being here has been strategic. It's a young city. It's a hurting city. And even as much as people will complain about the negatives of Minneapolis, I will say, man, it's a good place to be in the light business because, when things are hard, that's where the good news is needed. That's where hope is needed. And so we're here. We believe we're from here, for here. We are actively involved right in the heart of the city. Everything, when things are happening in the city, we're there. Like we're not off in the distance. We're not exporting other places what we're not trying to do incarnationally in our backyard.
You talk about a hurting city. You talk about being there. I mean, we felt it even just this past year.
Yeah.
But what does that look like tangibly for you to be in your role or have, this ministry, you'd call it a ministry, of what do you do? How do you step up? How do you serve this community when those things are happening?
Yeah, well, we have a saying, and again, this isn't even from us, but an old pastor in the city said, history is changed among friends. And so what often happens in crisis is people try to react without friendship. And when we react void of friendship, we make assumptions of each other. So what cities need, what communities need is deep-rooted, time-tested friendship so that when crisis hits, we're responding in and through those relationships. So in the Twin Cities, there may be many churches, right? Lutheran, Catholic, Presbyterian, Protestant, whatever, but there's one church. It is the bride of Christ, right? And so for these 15 years, we have been building friendships, uniting the church of the Twin Cities, and then trying to respond accordingly. So when George Floyd is killed in our streets, and the Black church is dealing with it different from the suburban church, different from the Hispanic and immigrant church, we're trying to say, how do we as the church respond? So Black pastors are coming to white pastors saying, hey, will you stand with us? Will you help us serve both the police and the protesters and the people that are right there? Same thing in this year when ICE comes into our city and the immigrant church is hiding and hurting, and you have people on both sides of the political spectrum. Like, we really believe that Jesus is the one that stands in the middle. He welcomes rich and poor, sinner and saint, Republican and Democrat, right? He is as bipartisan as you can be. He's welcoming people, right? So we're gathering leaders in the city. We're trying to figure out how do we help the immigrant community. We're trying to figure out how do we come behind first responders, whether they want to be here or don't. How do we as the church be a prophetic voice on all sides? And we want to be a uniting force in that. So we're working with young people. They're on the front lines anyway. We want to help them. How do you thoughtfully engage this? How do you not assume the worst of others? How do you seek to understand, right? To listen first rather than coming with a pitchfork or a picket sign, right? How do we try to understand that there's complexity here and there's leaders here who are trying to figure this out? And God wants to meet us in that, but he always is after the last, the least, and the lost. And so those are the things that God is about. That's what Jesus is about. And so we as his people want to be following his example.
So you almost see it as like you guys could do more, not as a physical church with a physical building, because you can serve as a conduit to connect all these other churches that are brick and mortar.
We had hundreds of pastors in our building. Again, we're right downtown, right? So we had them during the protests. It became a ascending place. We had them during this January, February, and again, pastors are asking questions, what do I do? Right. And I'm not going to pretend I have the answers. I'm a guy from North Dakota, right? I'm a guest to this city like a lot of people. But what we did is we had Black pastors and immigrant pastors and suburban pastors sharing both, here's things I don't know what to do, but then here's solutions we're seeing. And we want to rally behind each other. So where is it that there are solutions? How do we get behind those? Right? When George Floyd, the riots and crises are happening, the suburban church isn't going to be the experts on how do we handle this, right? They're out in Wayzata, Minnetonka, whatever. It's the church in North Minneapolis. It's the church that's right near George Floyd Square that we need to hear from. How do we serve? How do we help? What does that look like? Again, in the context of friendship, we can lift each other's arms and say, man, I don't understand. I don't pretend to understand, but I got your back.
Was there ever a part for you at any point in this process where you're like, what if I just like was a pastor at a church, right? Like there are, churches that just serve the congregation that they have.
Yeah.
But it feels like more of a deliberate decision to say, okay, we're going to do this thing where we're everywhere.
Yeah.
Was there consideration ever of saying like, I just want to be a pastor. I just want to be here and serve this community?
A lot of times, man. And I serve, I'm a part of a local church. I've even served on the teaching team of my local church, which happens to be, in Plymouth, Minnesota. And it's a multi-generational, multi-ethnic church. But, again, I think the callings are different and the assignments are different, right? Mm-hmm. For me, we have felt uniquely called to serve the church, to be a bridge, right? We say in our team, we're called to be a bridge. We're a bridge between churches that maybe wouldn't normally work together, an old church and a young church, a black church and a white church, a progressive church and a very conservative church. We say, man, we're called to bring people together. Same thing is true in culture. Like we want to be a bridge between the church and those that are not engaged in the church. Because if we're honest, the church has a negative reputation often. We're known for what we're against. We as Pulse, again, the name is Pulse Evangelism. Evangelism means good news. We want to rally the church around the good news and the hope that Jesus came to offer and bring. And we want to be a bridge between people who maybe don't get along on everything, but we can get together and come together around, hey, we believe Scripture has truths for life that are benefit. We believe Jesus is the way that he offers life and eternity and healing to anyone who would call on him. Can we come together around that? Mm-hmm. Now, 50 times people have said, you should start a church. Why doesn't this become a church? But again, my feeling and calling is to serve the church. Mm-hmm. Like we're here to lift up the arms of the pastor, whether they're paid or not. And a lot of pastors aren't paid. A lot of them are bivocational. We're here to lift their arms, to help them reach their young people, reach their community. Maybe we can help them put on events they can't do. I mean, the event this weekend in Arkansas was free, right? We didn't charge a ticket. We do that intentionally because we want those that can't afford things to have access to things, right? We're not here just to feed those that already have all the food they need. No, we want to bring something that's needed to those that maybe couldn't otherwise have access.
The college kids you were reaching 20 plus years ago in North Dakota are not the same college kids that you're reaching today.
Yeah.
They're tangibly different between the two of them. What has changed between a 20-year-old 20 years ago and a 20-year-old now? And how does that change your approach?
Yeah, I mean, everything changes. It's interesting. Billy Graham, when they started, and they started in the 40s, they had this slogan. They said, we want to be changing with the times, but anchored to the rock. And I think that should be every church's slogan, right? How do I not change the truths that are unchanging, but how do I constantly adapt the packaging to meet the needs of where people are? The job of a missionary is to learn the language, is to learn the culture, is to learn the context, right? So this generation is incredibly different. You couldn't say more different than I'm a millennial, right? We were passionate about different things. Our patron saint was maybe Bono, right? Or whatever, right? And it's like, you just think of the things that we're in. Like we knew what it was like to get a phone, but we weren't born with one, right? Mm-hmm. This generation, technology and digital is their first language, right? They are involved and engaged at everything. I mean, ChatGPT is involved in their life in an active way. A full circle moment, March of 2006, we did this event at NDSU that I was helping lead. April of 26, we were back at NDSU. The students are now leading this effort. And again, you couldn't have it be more different. But what was the same is students are reaching students. Students are sharing about how their life is being changed. And the encouraging thing for me is that I think this generation is way further ahead. Like they are way hungrier, way more passionate, way more committed. The stats that are being demonstrated now is there's a religious awakening and revival that's being led by Gen Z. They're now the most attending percentage generation of church attenders. They're the most spiritually open. They're the most engaged. And so like you couldn't even have dreamt of this, but it's just happening. It's happening right now.
What do you attribute that to?
I mean, God is the short answer. I think there's a lot of people that have prayed. I think grandpas and grandmas and moms and dads. But I think part of it is also the negative. Like, again, when people say, I can't believe you're in Minneapolis. And, if I'm from North Dakota, right? So North Dakota, people don't think of Minneapolis in a nice way right now, right? Unless they're coming to a Vikings game or a Twins game, they're not coming to Minneapolis. I've even had people say, you got to get out of there. It's going to hell in a handbasket. right? But I think the truth is that where things seem bad is actually where the need is greatest. And because the need is greatest, the hunger is greatest. And so while it would be easy to say all the negatives, political division, economic unrest, health insecurities, a global pandemic, the erosion of things that we used to put our hope in, all of these things that have created an instability have called this generation to look for something that's sacred, something that stands, something that has stood the test of time, right? Something that is, not dependent on human leaders that keep letting me down, right? And I think all of that has called people back to faith and say, what's the purpose of this? What's the meaning of this? And so what I'm seeing more and more is you have teenagers and 20-somethings that they are now teaching their parents how to come back to faith. They are calling their hometowns back to faith because they're coming back to the thing that is tried, tested, true, sacred, and real, and they're experiencing it for themselves, and they're wanting to build their lives on it.
How do you stay relevant during all of this? Because I won't lie, I turned 30 this past month, and one of our interns called me Unc, and I felt myself aging rapidly.
Oh,
right?
man.
But I'm sure for you, it's like you start this, it's like these are my peers.
Yes.
And then now it's like these kids are speaking an entirely different language than I am.
Yes.
Like how do you yourself adapt to not feel disingenuous also when you're trying to be like the meme, like the fellow kids,
Yes.
Like how do you stay real and authentic, but also engaged?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm just trying to be honest where I am. I'm not a college kid anymore. I'm a dad. I'm if I'm not doing my work, I'm driving kids to soccer practice and sports and helping them with math homework. Life changes, right? But I think what people want is authenticity. And I think for me, the best way I can stay relevant is to keep my faith fresh, right? Like, am I loving God in a sincere way, or is this a show? I think that's the criticism people have of public Christianity is, it just seems like it's fake and that's just polish. And I tell our young leaders, I said, listen, like when you have a microphone, you should just be sharing what you share all the time. Like, is this changing your life or not? If it's not, then what are you doing? Like, you're just an actor, right? And so for me, it's like, do I love God? Do I love my family? Do I love my neighbor? And yeah, I have to be constantly listening and learning. And I can't put my walls up. What we often see with older leaders is they guard their turf, right? They protect their status. And then younger leaders, you see the opposite. They're trying to take them out. They're resenting. And actually, before God, like, we need each other. Like, I need older leaders to coach me and mentor me and help me learn what I can't see. And I need the zeal and passion of the young. And I want to open the door for them just as somebody opened the door for me. And so, man, I would say my relevance doesn't come from me anymore, right? It comes from God, it comes from my kids, and it comes from this generation of, man, let me tell you 50 things they're doing that I could never dream of. And they're better at it than I am. Like, I'm not trying to be a TikTok influencer. That would be awkward for everybody, but man, I got 100 of them and they are killing it. And you should be encouraged that there's people in the midst of the madness online bringing hope, bringing good news, bringing perspective. We want to get behind them.
Yeah, I read an article that you were like a guest writer, and you talked about like Gen Z is not interested in like filling a stadium, or that's not their goal. Yeah, which I think is interesting because was it 2018?
Yeah,
that was the thing.
Yeah, we filled the stadium.
You filled the stadium. You filled US Bank Stadium, 50,000 young people for an event just 8 years ago.
Yep.
And now you're looking 8 years into the future, and you're like, that's not the mode anymore. It's not about packing 50,000 people into a stadium. It is about having 100 people who can reach 100,000 people on TikTok. I mean,
yes.
What is the new way that you measure or strategize to try and meet it if it's not these big events, maybe that we're used to seeing?
Yeah, and I think what we would say is it's not either or, it's both and, right? So it's like we want to reach people from stadiums to cell phones. The difference between a stadium and a big event is an event comes and goes, but a person carries that light with them 365 days a year. So it's easier to see the return on investment when you see 50,000 people in a field or in a stadium. It's harder to see it when you see 100 people in a room. But the truth is those 100 people in a room, they're reaching a stadium every day. Like some of our Gen Z leaders, I mean, they're speaking to over 1 million people every time they pick up their phone. I mean, some of our young people reached more people last year than I have in 15, 20 years. I mean, and God's using this generation. Again, the microphone might look different, but for me, it's the question of we want to reach people everywhere people are gathered, right? If big events didn't work, like somebody should tell Taylor Swift that, right? Because it seems like the big event is doing just fine. That said, Taylor Swift has learned that she's reaching people digitally, socially, in a million other ways that aren't involving the Eras tour that might be at US Bank Stadium. So there's a place for everything, and we value every expression, right? We want to meet people from the small to the big, everywhere in between, and we want to dignify that. In the past, people would say an evangelist, that's somebody who's on a stage with a microphone. And I say, yeah, that's one very small expression. There's a million ways to do it. There's a billion ways to do it. And we need a billion different expressions that need to be dignified and honored and sent out. We need people everywhere carrying the hope and good news. And that's how we change the world. It's salt and light. We need people everywhere.
How hard is it when you get to a point, though, where it's like, I'm not here to amplify my own name? Because I could see how, especially for young kids who have a TikTok or an Instagram presence, where you're an influencer, and it's like people are following me. I have a million followers. Or, people are coming to this stadium. I drew, this many people to the stadium, or I'm in charge. I'm the one. And I feel like it's really easy to lose yourself in all of this, even if you go into it saying like, my intentions are pure, of thinking like, man, look at me. How hard has that been for you personally? And how do you coach up some of the younger kids that you're working with now to be like, this is a trap you could fall into easily. Here's how you don't.
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, we have this program called Pulse 100, and Pulse 100 started based off of a quote. There was an old evangelist revivalist named John Wesley, and he had this prayer, and he prayed, God, would you give me 100 who hate nothing but sin and fear nothing but God, and will shake the gates of hell. It was this kind of old British prayer from the 1700s. And I remember when I read that, I was like, God, is there 100 that we could pour into and raise up? Like just men and women, like whatever their calling is, whatever it looks like, that we could just champion and open doors for. And one of the reasons for that prayer was a lot of my mentors had passed away. Billy Graham, Luis Palau, others. And I've seen a ton of examples of people who have gotten caught in scandal and done stupid things, living a double life. And if I'm honest, like I'm not immune to any of that, right? Like I'm not. The reason I don't have negative news tied to my name isn't because I'm better than anybody, right? It's the grace of God, and it's lots of systems of checks and balances, because none of us are immune to the attacks. Like you think about money, you think about sex, you think about pride, you think about these pitfalls of life, they're toxic for everyone. And the truth is that fame, like none of us were made to handle fame. Like we weren't made to be worshiped. There's a reason why people love seeing what the celebrities did now, because it's almost entertaining for us, the next famous person being an idiot. But the truth is we all kind of want that a little bit in some kind of way, but we weren't made to handle it. So we are trying to help a generation have roots that will help them last. We care more about their inputs, like how are you doing? What's going on in your life? Who's speaking into your life? Who are you when nobody's looking? Like I care way more about that than how big your following is. Because what I want isn't that you have a big thing now. What I want is that in 10, 20, 30 years, you're still living faithfully. Like you're a committed husband or mom or dad or mom. You're good in your workplace. Like you are who you say you are. Every time somebody falls, it hurts all of us. And every time somebody lasts, it helps all of us. So we want to help people be faithful in the long haul. This isn't a sprint. This is a long distance endurance race that we want to help people live it well.
You talked about revival at kind of the start of our conversation. You're not the first person to say that you feel like our nation is on the precipice of revival. What does that mean, and what would that look like? Yeah, well,
if there's anything I'm a student of, it's of church history and revival. And revival is basically this term. I mean, it's a term that's rooted in science. To revive means to bring back to life, right? So that's kind of where the word comes from. But spiritually, there are seasons of what people will call revival and awakening. Revival is always for the people of God, and it typically precedes awakening, which is for the culture. And I believe we are in a time of both. Like, I believe God is bringing dead things back to life in his church. Like, you're seeing more prayer happen. You're seeing more people come back to their faith. You're seeing you're seeing this in the Catholic Church. Mm-hmm. You're seeing this in the non-denominational church. You're seeing in the Orthodox Church. Attendance numbers are booming. People are coming alive. People are coming back. They're coming back in droves. I mean, you even see stories of people lines outside of church doors to get into what? Is there a concert? Is there a celebrity? No, it's church. Like, it's church. This would be what definitionally we would say this is a spiritual revival. Right. And then that turns into awakening. Awakening means more people turning to Jesus, more people converting to Christianity, more people coming to faith and realizing that God has something for them. And I would say historically, the data points of what we're seeing in culture would align with anything we've seen historically of what's happened throughout American history or world history. We are living in a time right now of revival and awakening, whether people see it now or whether the stories and the stats will come out in the decades to follow. I believe that some are living in it, some are going to miss it. But if you talk to Gen Z and you say, is God moving? They'd be like, what are you talking about, man? Like, they'll describe a TikTok revival that happened during the pandemic, millions of Gen Z coming to faith, thousands of Gen Z being baptized in their tub, in their house, like, their friend baptizing them over the phone, right? Hey, fill up the water, dunk your head under it. Like, it didn't look like how it looks in the sacred ways at this church. Revival and God's movement, it never looks the same. It always takes on the flavor of that culture and that time and place. And we're living in a very exciting time right now.
How long do you want to do this as far as the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes I want to be done right away. But I would say, I tell people, nobody says they're going to fun. They say, I'm going to work. And, work should feel like work. Like, it's hard, right? It's hard to believe in a culture that doesn't believe. It's hard to carry good news in a world that's surrounded by negative news. It's hard to keep your heart pure when people question everything and judge everything. All of that is hard, right? There's hardship to any job, any profession. Mine isn't different. I know I'm on earth to do this, right? I'm on earth to tell people about Jesus. I'm on earth to help young people be unleashed and grow. Like, we have God has provided money for buildings in downtown Minneapolis, and we've purchased these buildings not because we're planning on being done. We want generations to be changed. Like, I envision, like, I've done this for 20 years. For 20 years, maybe the first 10 was about, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Let's fill a stadium. Let's do whatever. Like, my next 20 years, my next 50 years, God willing, is about helping others launch, right? Helping them see God can use you. What's the idea he's given you? There may be 100 people who tell you're nuts and they don't believe. I'm going to tell you you're nuts, but this could happen. Like, God could use you to do the thing that the world needs. And I want to be a champion for those that want to reach their generation. Every generation needs to reach their own generation, right? This isn't going to be old people with young and old. Like, we need people to come alive where they are. God uses us where we're planted. Like, he's going to use people in that neighborhood to change that neighborhood. That might need, some people need to move in. We're going to cast a vision for that. But I want to help you see the purpose of the ground beneath your feet and help you see that God wants to use you at your work, at your cubicle, right? At your locker, right? There is no small place because people matter to God. And so if you're near people who are hurting, which we all are, that God has a purpose for you. And that's the greatest purpose on earth, is to get to love each other and see each other and hear stories and see how lives can be changed. And that's like, I call it God's antidepressant, right? The second I see you and I care and I start to carry some burden that's not my own, it's like I feel better about life because I'm now being used not just for poor me and my life is so horrible, but now I'm seeing, no, man, God wants to use me. And I think that's the beauty of when we plug into God's source and we live how he made us to live, we do make the world a better place. And that's the goal.
You're already doing this a little bit, but the last thing I really want to ask you is you're talking to an audience right now that is WCCO. So there's people who are from all walks of life that are seeing this and watching this. But if you were to try and give someone that evangelize, pitch where you're telling them like, hey, this is what I got, or this is what we got.
Yeah.
What would you say to someone? What is the pitch that you want to make to the viewers that are watching this that may have faith, may not?
Yeah. I mean, listen, if I'm at a restaurant, and I do this often, I'll say a simple question. I'll say, how are you? And then I'll say, can I ask you a weird question? And then they'll say, okay, what is it? And I say, well, if God could do something for you, what would you want him to do? And sometimes people say, I don't believe in God. And I say, that's fine. I said, well, can I ask you another question as I'm asking, how are you? And they say, yeah. And I said, well, the reason I'm asking is because several years ago, I was in the hardest season of my life. The pandemic was happening, and that was happening for all of us. But for me personally, my sister was dying of cancer during this time. And I'm watching my day one best friend waste away. And every day I just wished that somebody would check in on me and care. And people just don't do that, right? Like, we're kind of all stuck in our own life, and people would ask me how I'm doing, and I'm fine, but I'm falling apart. And so one of the things I do to remember my sister is I ask people how they're doing, and then I ask them if I can pray for them, because that's what she would do. So it helps me in some kind of way, right? So as I'm having this conversation with people, and I'm talking about faith, I'll say, number one, I want people to know that God sees them and loves them, right? I want them to know that your life matters, right? And that's why I'm having this conversation, is your life matters to God, and it matters to me. It mattered to my sister. Your life matters. Your pain matters. Whether you believe in God or not, he believes in you. And if there's one life tip I would give people, I believe this to be true. The closer you can get to understanding God, and specifically Jesus, I believe you can become the most ideal version that you were made to be. It's like this life hack. Like, the closer I get to Jesus, the closer I understand what he did, what he said, why he came. And again, whatever you want to think, but this guy 2,000 years ago changed history in a way that nobody else has. It changed how we record time from AD to BC. It changed how we consider everything. Like, something happened. So you would do well to understand this life of this man. My belief is that Jesus came to pay for the consequences that all of us have carried. Our lying, our cheating, our swearing, our stealing, the guilt we all carry. And I don't need to explain guilt to people. They know what it feels like. Jesus lived the life we couldn't live. He was the only perfect person that ever lived. He was the only person that didn't deserve what came to him, right? He deserved none of it. He lived the life we couldn't live, and then he died the death we deserve. Jesus died to make a way so that we could have life. The reason I believe in this is because Jesus didn't just die. He conquered it, and he rose from the grave. If they find Jesus' body this week or next week, I'm out of here, man. Like, there's nothing to believe in. But Jesus is alive, and he calls people who turn to him and admit their need. He meets us, and he gives us the chance to have life. And that's the offer, that Jesus wants to give you life. He wants to give you hope. He wants to give you purpose, right? If the ultimate connection of the universe wanted to help you out, would you want it, right? That's the question. The only thing standing in the way is maybe pride. Like, I don't need that, or I'm too good for that. But I think, again, if we admit our need and invite him in, he can do what only he can do. So, yeah, my simple challenge is turn to Jesus. He changes everything. He's changed my life. I've seen him change a generation. He's the only one that's never let me down. And, yeah.
And the person at the restaurant says...
I mean, so I was at a restaurant recently. I mean, I've been at restaurants where people say, and I'm not saying all this at the restaurant, but I was at a restaurant recently and said, I don't believe in God, but please keep doing this. The world needs more of this. I was at another restaurant recently, and the girl said, did my mom send you? And I said, no. And she sat down and started crying and said, my life's falling apart, and I feel shame and guilt, and I just don't know if God can forgive me. And I said, I just want you to know, like, I'm here so you know that God loves you. You're not too far gone. I believe all of us are one conversation away from being made new with God. Like, your guilt can be lifted off. God wants to offer forgiveness. He offers a reset. And it's just incredible. Again, it's listening. Like, it's just, am I listening? I say evangelism is more about listening than talking. Listening to people, listening to their story, listening to what's going on, and then listening to God. God, is there something you want to say in this moment to this person? And it's amazing what God can do if we let him.
Well, Nick, I hope our listeners have enjoyed listening to you and sharing your story. You guys have another event coming up, right? July?
Yeah, we're going to be we always have events coming up. So we have monthly events we do in the Twin Cities called Revival Nights. They're just open worship and people come, bring families. We're going to be at the Red River Valley Fair in Fargo, which is the fair I grew up going to.
Nice.
And I snuck into it, actually, so I had to pay double admission when I came back because I had to repent of not paying. But, so we set the attendance record last year at this fair. We beat, I don't know if it's Faith Hill and Jelly Roll, and, we had 13,000 people come out. And so July we'll be back there, and then we'll be a part of things at the State Fair in Minnesota. So, we're always planning things. We're always bringing young leaders in. We're opening a training center this October. So God willing, that'll be opening in October right downtown Minneapolis. And we're here for the long haul.
Man, I could talk to you for all day, but thank you for taking a little bit of time to share with our listeners just who you are and why you do what you do.
Hey, thank you. I'm honored.
Hey, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode of Bigger Than Belief. I hope it is something you really enjoyed or found fascinating, regardless of really where you fall on the faith spectrum. I think there is something in this episode for every single person. If you did like this episode, if you made it this far, please take a moment and share us with a friend. Say, hey, this is fascinating. I like this. I thought this conversation about Gen Z leading a spiritual revival was fascinating, or I like Nick's story. Just share us with one friend and just say, hey, you might like this too. That is really the best way to share what we're doing here, which is real stories of real faith held by real people. Every single Thursday, we release a new episode, and we're just trying to change the way traditional media talks about faith, to change it to a way that's real and authentic and meaningful and true. Also, if you like this episode, please take us a second, if you haven't, and give us a 5-star rating, please. That helps us tremendously. And if you aren't following us, please follow us. And if you like this one, hey, consider leaving a review as well. Again, that just helps us break through that algorithm on the podcast top charts. We're trying to be seen by even more people, and that's the number one way you can help us do just that. All right, folks, I said it before, I'll say it again. I hope you have a very safe, happy, healthy, awesome, relaxing 4th of July weekend. As our nation celebrates this 250th birthday, I hope it's one that is relaxing, restful, great for you. We'll see you right back here next Thursday, as always, with a brand new episode of Bigger Than Belief. In the meantime, be well, and we'll see you very soon.